Okay, we're ready to begin whenever you are.
Okay, I'll call the regular meeting of the Oregon City Commission order for Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rachel Lau Smith is absent this evening. Mayor Dan Holliday.
I'm here, and I believe next we have, we're going to skip the flag salute, and the next is proclamations and so forth. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay, so the only thing we have on there that I recall is the project advisory team for 2040 appointments. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I will read those now. So we have Ray Atkinson is under alternate transportation, Sage Cerulean, rental housing, public assistance, Ray Gordon, arts and culture, Victoria Meinig, Chamber of Commerce, Kelly Upkeys, Downtown Oregon City Association, Dan Fowler for a small employer, and I'm excited to announce that John Diaz is the president of Bench Bay Knives, has volunteered to be our large employer representative. Joshua Carrillo from Alternative Housing, Amy Wilhite, Citizen Involvement Committee, Sherry French, Aging in Place, Elderly Advocate, Chris Staggs, Planning Commissioner, Mike Mitchell, Planning Commissioner, Lisa Davidson, Clackamas Community College, Ariel Christ, Advocate for Persons with Mental Disabilities, Ron Hyde, Advocate for Persons with Physical Disabilities, Nancy Ide, Advocate for the Homeless, Christina Lugo, LGBTQ, Stacia Hernandez, Indigenous People, and the Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Maria Kott, a Russian-speaking home builder, Don Ward, an African-American home builder, Nicole Abraham, Asian Pacific Islander, Des Valdez, Faith Community Youth Pastor, Alejandro, I'm not going to mess that up, Ferreira, Youth Representative, Lucy McKay, Youth Representative, Holly Bohm, Community Health Advocate, Roseanne Johnson, Home Builders Association, Sean Dackler, Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, Chris Weaver, Natural Resources Committee, Grant Blythe, Historic Resources, Bob LaSalle, Transportation Advisory Committee member, Ben Simmons, TAC alternate, Heidi Blackwell at large, and Amber Stenson at large. I'm going to appoint myself, and I have not made a decision on the alternate or the commission member. With that, we can proceed to, is it citizen comment?
Yes, citizen comment is next.
So on my list, I have the only one for citizen comment that I have so far is Miss Elizabeth Grazier Lindsay.
I have that, and then also Betty Mumm.
Okay, well, let's take Miss Grazier Lindsay first.
Okay, Elizabeth, you're on the phone, and if you could please state your first and last name for the record, and then city of residency, and you have up to 3 minutes to speak. You may begin.
I'm Elizabeth Grazier Lindsay. I'm in Beaver Creek. Although I'm a political opponent of Oregon City's mayor, and I wouldn't vote for him if I could, I'm astonished how he's being villainized by a mob mentality for speaking ordinary conservative ideas that even a surprisingly large number of Black conservatives and at least one Black Biden supporter speak. Of course, we want people to treat each other with dignity and equity and to be woke to waste racism. But conservatives and liberals both have good ideas on how to solve racism. Being conservative does not mean a person is racist. Not signing a letter signed by every other mayor does not define racism. Quoting a newspaper and saying a two-digit number is not an epidemic does not define racism. The Urban Dictionary defines wokeness, and two of the definitions are not positive. 1, being constantly offended. 2, self-righteousness masquerading as enlightenment. I found 3 discussions of free speech especially significant. The first one is in Harper's Magazine, published online, a letter on justice and open debate, signed by more than 150 prominent authors, thinkers, and journalists, July 7th. Ayeshat Khanbi spoke on the problem of wokeness in March 2019. And Crystal and Sagar of The Hills Rising discussed free speech and cancel culture on July 8th and 9th. I'm alarmed by the groupthink that is taking over Oregon City and many other places, and that is working to intimidate and destroy anyone who doesn't agree 100%. I am sure that many of the majority of Oregon City voters who elected the mayor still support him, but I understand them not speaking up and becoming a new target of modern-day McCarthyism, Salem witch trials, moral mania, because personally I don't want to speak up either. But if those of us who understand how undemocratic the destruction of free speech is don't speak up, we will be complicit cowards just like the mob.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Commissioner Mumm?
Okay. So my disclaimer is, I live with the mayor. His words are his words. He does not speak for me. I do not speak for him. My name is Betty Mumm. I live in Oregon City. Commissioner Smith, I was very saddened and disappointed with your comment at the July 1st meeting. You made me feel like a cheap blancoeur and my comments had no value because I sleep with the mayor. I've never hidden the fact that I sleep with the mayor. For you, or live with the mayor, I should say. For you to judge me as citizen of Oregon City and my comments is very disrespectful. But considering how disrespectful you have been lately, it should have come as no surprise. I know that you love history, but you may want to get into the year 2020. Women have been able to voice their own opinions in public for well over 80 years, no matter who they live or sleep with. When we were on the commission together for 4 years and had a difference of opinion, it was never at the rudeness that is going on currently. Clearly, your comment was okay with your fellow commissioners since they did not make any comments themselves. I have always valued and respected your opinion, Commissioner Smith, but I'm very disappointed in your actions. I've said in many times over the years that if you only talk to like-minded people, you will never hear the whole story. Maybe you and your fellow commissioners only want to hear from citizens that have the same ideas as you. Thank you.
Mayor, may I respond?
Hang on one second. Thank you, Commissioner Mumm. Was there anybody else, Katie?
No, no one else for citizen comment.
Commissioner Smith?
So, Betty, I want to apologize, and I will say that the last meeting was a frustrating meeting. My point that I was making or trying to make was that really simply the only person that spoke in agreement to the mayor was a person that was living under the same roof, and the way that I said it was disrespectful, and the way that I said it was not appropriate, and I misspoke, and I will apologize for that. I don't think that I didn't mean to make it personal, and I apologize for that. I have great respect for you as well. So I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate the comments, and I will do better. It's been a frustrating couple months, and sometimes we say things that come out wrong. The mayor has clearly done that in the past. The difference is I will apologize for it. And I will move on, and I will try to do a better job. And so I thank you for calling me out on it.
Thank Commissioner Smith. What's next, Katie?
Next is adoption of the agenda.
Is everybody okay with the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask, or
Mr. Conkle.
could I request that item 8A be put onto the general business, please?
That's off the consent agenda?
Correct.
What is it?
It's the resolution number 2016 bylaws for the Citizen Involvement Committee. There was an attachment that we need to add to that resolution.
That's fine. So other than that, everybody okay?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, then let's move on. Katie, what's next?
The next item is resolution number 20-22, and that is the Parklets discussion with LaTourette taking the lead on that.
Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. So I'm here to talk about Oregon City COVID-19 Recovery Assistance Program. Katie's bringing up a PowerPoint. This is a program to help our businesses in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. All right, this program contains two distinct components. The first is for parklets in the right-of-way. We'll get into that in a bit more detail. And then the second one is for temporary outdoor dining and retail in parking lots. Together, they're anticipated to support all of our businesses in Oregon City, the ones in the right-of-way for businesses such as those on Main Street that don't have parking lots, and then the parking lot program to support other ones such as the businesses up on the hilltop. This is a pilot program. It's intended, if approved by the commission, it would go into effect tomorrow through November 30th, and then it would come back next year for a duration between March and November. And between those time periods, we'll come back to the commission, check on how things went, and see if there's any tweaks that are needed to any of these standards. So first I'm going to talk about the Parklets program in the right-of-way. Before we get into it too much, I want to show you a few different pictures and examples, just so we get an idea. So this is taking a on-street parking space and repurposing it for business use. In this case, we're just talking about restaurant use. Here's some additional examples. You may have seen them around town, not this town, but other towns lately. And one thing you may have noticed is how many different forms of parklets there can be. There are a lot of jurisdictions that adopted parklets. It's just the standards that are in place vary quite a bit. So I'm going to summarize some of our standards. All of the standards are put in the program that was attached to the agenda. We require a buffer from cars. It has to be able to withstand light vehicular impact. And what that really means is you can lean on it and it won't fall or crumple or anything like that. It is not going to protect people from car crashes, but it is going to create a hard barrier. Also, there are requirements where the walls of it have to be set back from the edge of the parking space and the edge of the lanes as well. And we have to have reflective tape and poles on the corners of lots. So there's some methods in place to help protect the people who will be using them. So one parklet is allowed for every business for every frontage. So if you're on a corner and you have frontage on two streets, you could, in theory, have two parklets. And if there's one business right next to another business and they each want a parklet, they can kind of combine forces and have a bigger parklet if they choose. If one business wants to have a parklet and invite another business to use their parklet as well, they can also do that. The requirements are that they're on streets with speed limits of 25 miles per hour or less, and they're limited to certain locations. This is just a snapshot of some of the places where you cannot have a parklet. So this program allows them anywhere within our mixed-use downtown district zoning designation, which is a lot of the lower shelf of the city, and then also on 7th Street from Singer Hill to Jackson. The places that are blacked out in red are places where there's either turn lanes, and so there is no parking lane, or there's ADA stalls, and so those are not available for use as a parklet. Some other requirements are that they have to comply with ADA, and so what that really means is, and a lot of parklets that you'll see, you step down into the parklet, there's the curb, and you step down to the street. That won't be the case for ours because we want to make sure that all people can use the parklet. And so we suspect that most of them will have some type of bench system or flooring below there. There'll be physical distance requirements, so the tables have to be set apart because the whole point of this is to help support businesses during the pandemic. There's material requirements as well, so it has to be sturdy materials, no chain link, no pop-up tents. And there is some maintenance requirements when we approve the parklets. The applicant is responsible to keep it clean and tidy and free of debris. There's a couple of questions. We had a work session regarding this, and there was some unanswered questions, so I want to make sure to include some of those. Some of the questions included are there other jurisdictions that require them on certain speed limits, and what is the relationship between using a parking stall and putting people in the stall versus the speed limit around? So we checked with 3 different jurisdictions on all of these answers. So Vancouver, they don't have any requirement for a speed limit, but theirs are all what they assume is between 20 and 25 miles per hour. The Dalles, theirs are on their downtown core, which is 20 miles per hour. And Milwaukee has it on streets, which they believe are 25 miles an hour. In Oregon City, our downtown is 20 miles an hour now, and 7th Street is 25 miles per hour. We did look at what it takes to change the speed limits of those roads and found out that it's challenging. There was a bill that didn't happen in the short session regarding allowing local jurisdictions to be able to be more in control of the speed limit, provided certain guidelines are met, and that didn't go through the short session. So at the moment, our speed limit downtown is 20 and 7th Street is 25. Also for the speed bill, I think there was concern on if we would even meet some of those target requirements to change or reduce speeds. The second question is about how much trips go by, so how many cars go by, how busy are these streets that the parklets are on. So Vancouver, Washington did not have trip data. The Dalles had 9,000 to 10,000 average daily trips, which is what ADT stands for. So each time a car goes by is 1. Milwaukee did not have data on their trip counts where they allow parklets. And in Oregon City, you can see our data enclosed, a lot more trips on 7th Street than we have on Main Street. So Main Street, we're about half of the busyness that the street of the Dalles that has their parklet is on. The other question was about fees and how much everybody charges. Vancouver, theirs is a pilot program similar to ours. Theirs is only through September, so they're not charging through that. They're going to come back and check in on it later. If it becomes more of a permanent thing, there'll likely be a charge. The Dalles doesn't charge, but they have a Main Street organization that apparently has a $2,000 charge to set up and take down these things. I'm still a little bit unclear on their relationship. Milwaukee, they have all sorts of charges. They're line itemed out. So there's charges for review, and then there's also charges for monthly rental of the parking space, and then there's different location-dependent fees. So new ones are a little bit more expensive, about $465 or $470, and then renewals are a lot cheaper because they have a lot less process there. At Oregon City, what you have before you is a resolution which does include a fee baked into the resolution, which is $25 per year per event. So if I want a parklet, it would be $25 this summer, and if I want it again next year, it'll be $25 then. And then if for some reason I have a parking lot and a parklet and I want both, it would be $25 for each of those. So each application we're reviewing would be a fee of $25. And then the last question that we were asked was, we're looking at just restaurants for parklets. Is everybody else looking at restaurants too? We landed on just restaurants because we heard concerns from the commission about lack of parking if we get parklets, and just trying to figure out what the demand is there. And so ours is just restaurants. Vancouver said they would consider other uses, but they're geared towards restaurants. The Dalles is restaurants and retail, and Milwaukee is also just restaurants. I wanted to follow up on what's happening with the after-hours parking program, which is part of our transportation demand management plan. So that's, as you recall, a program where we're taking parking lots that are not used after 5 p.m. and putting them into circulation for free parking for the general public. So we do have the 34 stalls available at City Hall right now. For River Crossing, which is the medical office building at 10th and Main. We just got the signs in, the correct version of the signs in yesterday, and so we'll be looking at putting up those signs soon. We're also working with Christmas at the Zoo at 524 Main Street. They have 31 stalls in their parking lot. I don't think we have a signed contract, but we are working with them on selecting sign locations, so that's looking pretty good there too. And I wanted to thank all of those businesses or property owners that are participating because they're offering their parking lot for free without compensation. All right, so that is the Parklets program. Is there any questions on Parklets before I move on? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Mr. McGriff.
Yes, so, $25 seems awfully low. So that's my first question. Will these parklets be inspected after they are installed to make sure that they are what they say they're going to be?
Yes, they're going to be permitted through our Public Works Department, specifically Development Services, and they've identified that they will do an inspection.
Okay, then, so switching over to your thank you for the information about the after hours. So, the River Crossing, or as some of us know it as the old First Interstate Bank building, I think that's particularly great. I do have a question about Christmas at the zoo. That's a, I thought that was Zach Stokes Engineering Company's parking lot.
It's the same building.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So ZCS Engineering is also in there.
In there, okay. And they're going to allow for some of that as well?
Mm-hmm. Looks like it.
Okay, so the answer to that question, Commissioner McGriff, is when we were talking about this, the idea is to be able to help businesses during this particular time. So, you know, money is tight for every small business that I know. The idea was to, you know, make it a nominal fee this year and then see next year what is going to happen as far as, you know, are we still going to be needing these things going into the season next year?
Thank you for clarifying that. I was trying to remember, I was looking in my notes to see what we had talked about from last time. Mr. Mayor, just one more observation. While I was downtown on several occasions this weekend, I noticed that a parklet appeared on the street that wasn't supposed to be there. I was unfortunately very disappointed in that particular facility being there without getting a permit or without getting permission from the city and jumping the gun.
And what did you do about that?
I didn't do anything about it because at the time I was making a turn and driving and I couldn't do anything about it, but I was just disappointed that somebody took advantage of the situation. We hadn't even approved it yet.
Well, it seems to me that when I see something that is not right, I report it to the proper folks, whether it's planning or code enforcement or whatever.
Yes, sir, it was reported.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
So what I want to be sure of, and this stems from when we allowed affordable housing, I never realized we were going to have converted freight containers up by Milner Veterinary converted into affordable housing. So I want to be sure that the pictures that I've shown, that what I see is what I'm going to get. So the question is, are our criteria such that we're going to have very pleasing parklets like this, or are we going to have something very, very different?
That's a very good question. I showed pictures where as close to our code as possible. You could get really ugly ones. You could get, you're not gonna get the ones that are strung together by cones, which we've seen around here as well, not in Oregon City. So we know that we have the requirement for a hard surround that can withstand light vehicular impact, and it can't be a type 2 barricade, so it's gotta be more than a cone or a little pop-up tent. So other than that, you have restrictions, no chain link, no sand. If there's other restrictions that you want to place, now would be a good time to do it. These ones all look really nice. I'm not confident that they all look this nice.
Nor am I, which is why I ask. I mean, I don't want to see whatever you want to call them, sawhorses or barricades or cones. If I could see these, I would be, and I want to support this for our downtown. I truly do. I just don't want it to look like a junkyard. So that's my concern, and I'll voice it. And my other thing is there any provision in this that, do these parklets, is there provision for ending them if we ever get to reopen at full capacity? Is that written into this agreement, or doesn't currently exist in that? Because that's what we're trying to do, is increase capacity. If the restaurants get their original capacity back, the parklets come to an end.
Right.
So, Commissioner O'Donnell, so the commission would have the authority to rescind this resolution whenever they see fit?
Or it will expire at the end of a season.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does expire November 30th. One thing that we heard from the Downtown Oregon City organization was that people were looking for a little more certainty on dates. And so that's why there is a hard date that this will end this season. But you can certainly rescind it before that if you want to.
But I express concern over places, because all the traffic stuff we ever hear is about protecting citizens and hard barricades. So now we're not going to do that. And I don't care what the provision says. I don't believe you can sign away your rights in a court of law. But I'm willing to do this. I'm concerned about the aesthetics of it. I'd like to see something that guarantees that we have something pleasing to the eye. But I'll leave that to my other commission members and to staff to further the discussion.
Well, the problem is, Commissioner, that pleasing to your eye doesn't necessarily mean pleasing to my eye.
Well, I would say that everything we saw there was very nice. I don't want to get into artistic discussion. I'm just saying some minimum level that does our city a service. And that's all that needs to be said.
Right. Commissioner Smith, do you have anything for us?
No, I have the same concerns, but I want to support this as well. My question then is, so if, because this is seasonal based, then no one's allowed to keep these through the winter season, right? I mean, so they'll place them out, they'll take them up and put them back out if the program restarts the next season?
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor Holliday, may I ask Ms. Turway another question?
Commissioner Gruff.
Yes, so I was reviewing the application, and you have here on the application on the very bottom, it says dimensioned site plan meeting standards, so the standards will be clarified. And then it says failure to secure permits for previous work or failure to pay fees on previous permits shall render the applicant, permittee, et cetera, ineligible for other permits, so forth. So that, that's good. Again, I support this. I would like to add pallets to this. I saw one in Selwood that was made out of pallets, and it was not very attractive, nor was it secure in any way. Their pallets were just kind of standing up, and it did not meet this test of being secure or providing actually a barricade of any sort for the diner. I would not have sat there personally.
So pallets as a form of a barrier?
Yes.
Like a prohibited material?
Yes. I would like to add that in addition to your chain link and cones. And also, people have used, I've seen them in Portland, they were made out of construction fencing, that orange stuff that they strung out and did that.
Yes, that's why I did the light.
That was another one. I was like, that's not going to secure anybody.
Okay.
The only concern I would have, the additional concern, is that while I do see in downtown that people do drive a little bit slower, Unfortunately, on 7th Street, if somebody wants to have one, I would be very nervous about it. The speed limit is exceeded on a regular basis as people zoom up and down the hill. It's not 25. It is posted at 25, but that's a concern I would have. But I think, you know, you're showing the picture on the left is a parklet, and then the one you're showing on the right is kind of what could happen in a parking lot. And but I think everything that you've shown are good examples of what we would like to see. So I think people need to be reasonable, and if between planning and community development, they're looking at it, I'm satisfied that you're going to be able to put something out there that people will be pleased with they see when they go down the street.
Thank
So
you, Commissioner.
I would support this.
I think the one comment I would make on that is that with some targeted enforcement on 7th Street, I think we could drastically reduce the speeding problem there during this time period, and I'm sure that Chief Band would go along with that. And I think we could make that happen fairly quickly to let people know that we're not going to tolerate speeding on 7th.
That'd be great.
You know, when we have things out there.
Thank you. That'd be a great idea.
So is there a motion?
I would like to move that we approve resolution.
I still have the parking lot.
Oh, parking lot. Okay, she's still got to do the parking lot.
I'll tell you all about it. All right. So for parking lot, I'll go quick. Here's some examples. Even harder to find an example of one that had any type of barrier around it. So like planters like one. That is not actually going to meet our code, but Googling for images is hard to find these days since these are so new.
Is that at Costco?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Okay, so these allow up to 50% of a parking lot to be used for restaurant, bar, or retail. So it's either one. So this is a little bit of an expansion in that it allows retail, which parklets do not allow. There is the same requirement for a barrier that is able to withstand light vehicular impact. This does allow tents and membrane structures, which is something that parklets does not allow. And this allows as many and as big as you want, as long as it's in the designated area. There is a requirement that you can't be messing with the landscaping under this program. If you want to change your landscaping, we go through a regular review process for that. You can't change your driveways or, you know, put it in a place where it blocks how people get into or out of your site. There's a requirement in this case that allows additional signage. Parklets, there was no additional signage that was allowed. So in this case, you get 2 additional 6 square foot ancillary signs to have. And there's some material requirements where we still don't allow chain link. We don't allow sand or rocks or that kind of thing. So that is the parking lot one. Any questions on the parking lot one?
Yes. So what's going on at Mike's Drive-In? That's not a parking lot. And did they put gravel down there?
Yeah, they went through a separate approval process, so they got site plan and design review for that. So they paid.
Okay, and my other comment is, I'm concerned about the membrane structure / tent, because while right now, you know, we don't get many storms, you know, if we're coming up into, you know, September, October, we could easily get a storm that could rip one of those things off and float it into 7th Street or someplace else. So what kind of assurance are we going to have those things are properly mounted and that they won't blow away in a storm?
There is a standard that says that they have to prove just that. Submit documentation showing that it's going to be anchored.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Well, 2 things. What measurement criteria do we know that they're sufficiently anchored? I mean, do we have some standard that, you know, 300 pounds of sand per leg is an anchor, or how do we determine that?
No, to be honest, it's discretionary.
But you're going to go out and look at it.
Mm-hmm. They have to submit documentation that says it will be good, and, I mean, there's a little bit of trust there.
And I'm a bit sensitized to the sign code after my beating last week on the farmer's market. So are any of these provisions, are they going to be variation to the sign code?
Yeah, sorry. In this case, we'll allow 2 extra small signs on site so that people know, like if it's in a shopping center, which restaurant that's for and that kind of thing.
And I just don't see the equity in that. One standard for the farmer's market and another for this. I don't want to not help these folks downtown. I just don't see the equity in what we're doing.
Okay, I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell on the membrane structures. I think that if they're going to use these in a parking lot, whether it's a tent or a membrane structure, that has to be inspected and approved by an inspector from the city.
I would concur with that, Mayor.
We can do an inspection. We don't have a specific standards for approval of it. We could require an engineer's stamp to say that it would stay in place.
No, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one of our guys going out there, and if he sees that it's obviously not going to work, then he can tell him no.
Okay.
Is there any?
Okay, so now is there a motion?
I just had one more question. Is there a design review or design site plan required for, okay, attach a site plan showing the parking lot changes proposed. Is that also going to show what they're proposing as well?
Yes, there'll be a review process for each of them. The parklets will be reviewed through engineering, like I mentioned earlier, and then these parking lot ones will be reviewed through our planning department. And I just want to clarify, for the parklets, it sounded like you wanted to add no pallets or construction fencing to the prohibited material, so that those 2 would be prohibited.
And to the parking lots. I don't want to see any pallets or construction fencing used in a parking lot either.
Okay, so in both cases, no construction fencing, no pallets.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, so is there a motion?
yes, I would move that we adopt resolution number 2022 to allow temporary parklets in the right-of-way and temporary outdoor dining and retail and private parking lots as specified with the additional requirements.
I guess I would second it for discussion. I have another comment or question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So I am trying to figure out or try to come up with a solution, because I do agree with Commissioner O'Donnell about the signs. I'm so frustrated with the sign stuff, with murals and signs and banners and all of it. And if a particular business is there a way to allow the businesses that are doing the parking lot piece of it to do some sort of signage that's within the sign code, whether it's an A-frame or whether it's something else, so that we are being consistent? Because I think this is, when we start making individual decisions, which is why we have avoided making the decision on the banner for the farmers market. I think we're kind of doing the same thing here, and I just think we have to have a process in this city for special events or for special circumstances where there's a process to get a permit to do a sign. We have to go back through the sign code to deal with all that, and that's not something any of us really want to do at the moment. But there's so many things there that need to be fixed. And especially for this situation, I don't know how we do it.
Further discussion?
Yes, Mayor Holliday, I have a question for Laura. I guess I want to backtrack a little bit. I'm not going to withdraw my motion, but why do we need extra signing? A person coming to a restaurant in downtown is going to see that there's a parklet there. They don't need it. We already have way too many A-frame signs downtown as it is now. I don't think this allows anybody to put a banner on a tent if they're in a parking lot to say open now or whatever they're doing. So I don't see any additional signing allowances for these things in the parking lots. It's going to be obvious that there is outdoor seating in a parking lot. So I'm not sure why we need additional, particularly downtown when the sidewalk's already pretty darn crowded.
The proposal as it stands does not allow additional signage associated with parklets. People would have to comply with this sign code as it stands, so you get a certain number of
Right.
freestanding signs, wall signs, A-frame signs. You can do an A-frame sign in the public right-of-way, so you can get a permit to do an A-frame on the sidewalk if you have enough space. It does allow 2 additional 6-square-foot signs for the ones in parking lots, and I think the thought there was that we have a lot more large shopping centers, so it's the size of a for sale sign, essentially. We have a lot more shopping centers that may have some of these restaurants, and if there's multiple restaurants, it just helps sort of differentiate. It may not be located directly in front of their door, it may be kind of separated a little bit. So we were thinking because of the distance, we could propose 2 additional signs, which are relatively small in the scheme of
But
a
that's just for the
property.
parking lot ones.
Just for the parking lot,
Okay.
but you can either apply it to parklets if you would want to allow those, or 2 small signs in parklets, or you could take it away from the parking lot as well.
My preference would be to not do any additional signs.
That would be my
You know,
preference
I think
as well.
Commissioner Griff's right. We're all intelligent adults. If we're going to a restaurant, we'll know they have outdoor seating.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mayor Holliday.
Okay.
I agree with that as well.
We'll amend the motion.
Okay, so you got consensus on that. We've got
So
a
I
motion
need-
in a second.
I need to amend the motion to remove the provision involving signing.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll amend my second.
There we go. Call the roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. What's next?
Park Place.
The next topic is Park Place Neighborhood Transportation Presentation, Your Mayor. If I can, I'll introduce the topic and then turn it over to Dana.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so we packaged this in a way such that really there's 2 items that follow this. This is Commission Item 7B. It's related to Item 7C and 7D, but we wanted to put one presentation together. So just know that there will be this one presentation, which will be an opportunity for you to ask or get all the information that you need on the other 2 items. The other distinction that I wanted to make before Dana gets started is there's been some discussion about the Park Place neighborhood, crosswalks in the Park Place neighborhood on Holcomb Boulevard. This is related, but our intent is to bring that topic in a more kind of comprehensive capital plan and capital priority plan for the first meeting in August is what I think we're targeting for that. So this is specific to a couple of grants that we're pursuing, and Dana's going to take it from there.
All right, so I've done a screen share, and sorry, technical difficulty. So tonight, thank you, good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners, for this opportunity to share with you an update on transportation items that Public Works is currently working on within the Park Place neighborhood.
Are you moving those forward, or is she?
I thought she was.
Sorry, I had to find the right button. So tonight, as John mentioned, we'll be sharing information on 2 topics, the Transportation and Growth Management, or TGM, grant application, and a Safe Routes to School Infrastructure grant application. Public Works staff have been working with the Park Place neighborhood, their leadership, and the Neighborhood Association on various topics. Tonight, I'll share more information on 2 of those. I'll give you an overview of the Transportation and Growth Management application, as well as the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure grant application. And then, so during this presentation, I'll share with you that information and you have the opportunity to ask questions. And then as John mentioned, after this agenda item, you'll have 2 separate agenda items to authorize those resolutions. So the Transportation and Growth Management Program is a program administered by the Oregon Department of Transportation and Department of Land Conservation and Development. The program provides funding for transportation system plans and TSP updates, as well as funding for corridor plans and other transportation planning efforts. planning for streets and land to lead to more livable, sustainable, and economically vital communities. This planning increases opportunities for transit, walking, and bicycling. The city often applies for this grant program. At times it's through the planning department, but some of the projects that it's done in the past is the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, and I believe it was also a part of the funding for the Holcomb Boulevard Pedestrian Enhancement Plan, as well as our most recent Transportation System Plan update. So how do we use these corridor plans? We use them during the land use process when private development is developing property and looking at the frontage. It helps us determine the build out on those frontages. We use it when we're applying for grants for capital projects and also to guide capital improvement projects. So the proposed grant application includes planning for as many roads as funding would allow within Park Place area. So we would focus primarily on roadways other than Holcomb Boulevard. We would look at Swan, Hunter, Hiram, Front, Apperson, Harley, and Ames. The work that we would complete with this grant would coordinate with the concept plan and also the Holcomb Boulevard Pedestrian Enhancement Plan. And then the outcome of this corridor plan would provide the build out of those roads, and it would identify which receive sidewalks, bike lanes, planter strips, really a guide for our development services group when those private developments come in. So this red outline kind of shows the area in question. There are some areas of the Park Place concept plan outside of that red boundary, and those are areas that are large enough that when they develop, they will really look at implementing those interior streets. And then we've got guidelines in our transportation system plan that kind of would assist with that. So we're really looking at these infill pieces. How do we, decide what these roadways are? So the Transportation Growth Management Grant application is due on July 31st. So far, we've gotten signed letters of support from the Planning Commission, Transportation Advisory Committee, Park Place Neighborhood Association, and the Development Stakeholders Committee, as well as the Citizen Involvement Committee. So our last ask for support is with the City Commission. The grant request is for $100,000 with a city match of $50,000 for a total project cost of $150,000. And then just to kind of share this work is something that staff has identified the need and had identified funding in the current fiscal year budget to complete this work, all with city funds. So this opportunity to apply for a grant allows us to kind of put a little bit of that money back in our pocket if we get the grant. Is there any questions on the Transportation and Growth Management grant?
Mayor Holliday, I have one.
Go ahead, Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, Ms. Webb, what projects under the Holcomb Boulevard Pedestrian Enhancement Plan have we implemented to date? And so I'm assuming there are other projects in that plan that you're looking at implementing if we get this additional funding.
So the Holcomb Boulevard plan has had, I believe, one section of it completed, which was, I believe, a joint project with Clackamas County and the city back maybe 2011, or maybe John might remember. It was a project that was kind of agreed upon when we took jurisdiction of Holcomb Boulevard.
I guess, Dana, I'll add to that. I don't remember the year, but yeah, it was the main project in front of where all the decorative streetlights are, most of which happened on I guess it'd be the north side of Holcomb Boulevard. So all those sidewalks along there, that was done, Nancy Crushar was here when that happened. The other projects, though, I think that's influence have been any development that's happened along that frontage. We utilize that Holcomb Boulevard plan to make sure we extend that. So like the Holcomb Boulevard plan, these whatever study work we can accomplish with that $150,000 grant would be not only for infill projects, you know, if we do can get to a capital project on those streets, as you may be familiar with those streets, they're all pretty rural roads, right? Most of them don't even have curbs and gutters. So it tells us where those curbs would be, whether there's going to be a bike lane on it or not, or a sidewalk or not. So it really helps to inform that. The boulevard that I get most frustrated with is Pease Road, for instance. If you've driven down Pease Road, there's various widths. The curb alignments are a little odd. You know, we didn't have the guidance document there, and over the years of development of that, it's shown. And so trying to avoid that. And even though those places are, you know, pretty heavily built out, we still think there's enough infill that we'll be able to apply a specific street standard to a specific street based on kind of the outcome of the study.
Okay, Katie, is there any comment?
No, there's not.
Okay, so what you're asking for now is just a letter of support from the commission?
So right now, if there's no other questions on transportation growth management, I'll move into the presentation on safe routes to school, and then your next agenda items are the voting.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant is a program that prioritizes projects that meet the following criteria. So it removes barriers for students walking and biking to school. It's located within a Title I school boundary area, roadways with higher speeds, and has project readiness. So why did we select Holcomb Boulevard and Holcomb Elementary School for this grant program? Holcomb Elementary is a Title I school, so they do have a high percentage of students who receive free or reduced lunch. There are large sections of missing sidewalks and no existing marked crosswalks within the Holcomb Boulevard corridor. Currently has a posted speed of 40 miles per hour. And we've got topographical survey information from previous work that we've done in the corridor. And we recently completed the safety review for the 4 proposed pedestrian crossings. We have an adopted Holcomb Boulevard pedestrian enhancement plan from 2005. So we've adopted a plan, and now we're working towards implementing that. And we have neighborhood interest in the project. So I feel like it's a good project for this grant program. And again, this is an infrastructure grant, so it's not a planning grant. It actually would provide the funding for construction. So kind of the steps to get to where we are today. For the last 6 months, staff has been working to identify a project that not only meets the grant criteria, but also accomplishes the desires of the Park Place neighborhood. To do this, we followed the following process. So for initial input, our goal was to understand what the community wanted. Staff sat down with the Park Place neighborhood leadership, attended a Park Place Neighborhood Association meeting, and discussed barriers to walking and biking to Holcomb Elementary School with the school district. From there, we moved into a technical review. With that better understanding of the concerns and desires of the community and the school district, we set out to understand the technical aspects of the corridor. This included looking at speeds, volumes, and reviewing the safety of the proposed crossing locations. So with that technical review, we have put together a technical project and have taken it to the groups for feedback. The results of the technical review identified that all 4 of the crossing locations could be placed in a safe location. So generally in the location we thought, but maybe adjusting slightly along the corridor to make sure we've got stopping sight distance. And so we've taken that back to the Park Place neighborhood representatives. They've shared that with the Park Place Neighborhood Association, the Oregon City School District, Transportation Advisory Committee, and then now tonight, the City Commission. So right now I'd like to walk you through the details of the project that we're proposing. So this map shows in 4 orange circles the proposed RRFB, or rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So those are the pedestrian activated flashing lights. So we would propose those at Front Street, at Swan Avenue, just a little east of Oak Tree Terrace so that we can make sure it's safe, and then again at Winston Drive. So along with those 4 proposed crossings, in the orange dashed line, we're proposing sidewalk or pathway. So we're still kind of working out a little of those details. Along here from Winston to Oak Tree Terrace is the frontage of some undeveloped property, and working through some of the constraints there. There is a mapped natural resource overlay district in that area between Winston and Oak Tree Terrace that we need to address. And then again, that sidewalk or pathway would extend from Oak Tree Terrace all the way to, I think they often refer to it as Holcomb School Road, and it would provide that sidewalk up into the school campus. And then additionally, on the south side of Holcomb, there is a small section of sidewalk infill that would happen just east of Oak Tree Terrace to connect to that existing sidewalk shown in blue. So that's an overview of the project. The application for the Safe Routes to School grant is due August 31st. We have already reached out to the Transportation Advisory Committee, who's provided a letter of support. The Parklets Neighborhood Association has also provided a letter of support. The Oregon City School District and the Holcomb Elementary School principal have all provided those letters of support. So the grant request would be about $1.3 million with a city match of $334,000 for a total project cost of $1.67 million. The process is pretty quick, so we would hear back by the end of the year if we are awarded funds to this grant program. The price tag for this project is high. There is some small acquisitions east of Holcomb Elementary in order to install those crosswalks, as well as the natural resource overlay work that I mentioned. We would need to have a full natural resource assessment and go through a land use process in order to install those pedestrian crossings. Is there any questions on the Holcomb Boulevard Safe Routes to School grant?
Hang on one second. Katie, is there any public comment here?
Yes, so there is one person, I was waiting for the end of the presentation, but there is one person that's on the phone. It's Lisa Novak, and she had wanted to comment on this agenda item. There's no one in the audience though, sir.
Go ahead, then let's have Ms. Novak.
Okay, Lisa, I have unmuted your phone. If you could begin by stating your first and last name for the record, and you have up to 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead and begin, please. Lisa, are you there?
My name is Lisa Novak. I live in Oregon City, Parklets neighborhood. Good evening, Mayor Holliday and commissioners. I will begin by addressing Mr. John Lewis. Safety should be non-negotiable, and the time for delay is over. Public Works must move forward with traffic calming and safety improvements along Holcomb Boulevard. We have known since 2004 that this corridor is inadequate. Only a small fraction of the improvements that are indicated in the pedestrian plan have been implemented, and since then, the Holcomb corridor has undergone extensive development. It should be no surprise to you that we are in dire need of crosswalks. I live here, I see and hear the problems, but don't take my word for it. There are comments from the Parklets Neighborhood Association, Holcomb school representatives, and a recent neighborhood survey all agreeing that the road is unsafe. Park Place is being strung along, and whenever this topic comes up, another survey is sent out. On the surface, it seems as if you are delaying this purposely and maybe even hoping that public opinion changes to agree with your own narrative. The time for gaslighting is over. I am disappointed, dismayed, and discouraged with these delays. The longtime homeowners have paid their taxes, and the developers have paid SBCs for the hundreds of new homes. Mayor Holliday, City Commissioners, between Bob LaSalle, Mr. Bob LaSalle, the Parklets Neighborhood Association, Holcomb School representatives, neighbors, and me, this issue has been brought up several times to the Traffic Advisory Committee, Planning, and City Commissioners. We have been loud, clear, and way more than patient with this issue. I was disappointed to learn on June 10th that Mr. John Lewis will be pursuing a grant to fund Holcomb crosswalks instead of utilizing city funds as he had been directed to do on June 3rd. And yet, 2 other neighborhoods are getting their crosswalks. Yeah, sure, perhaps these projects were already underway, but why wasn't Park Place considered when the plans for those neighborhoods were being made? I was also disturbed to learn that Public Works was not even planning to begin the Holcomb scoping until a grant was hopefully achieved. Other arterial roads in the city have traffic calming and safety improvements, but not Holcomb. Why is Park Place being excluded? I remind you also that we pay our taxes and developers have paid SBC funds for the hundreds of new homes. Where are our improvements? The city has utilized general funds for miscellaneous projects in other neighborhoods. Why not Holcomb safety? I urge you to support the use of city funds to move forward with the lighted pedestrian crosswalks. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments by Lisa Novak. I mean, this has been an area that has needed help for a long, long time. I guess my concern would be, you know, if this grant is not granted and we don't get the funds through this grant, this cannot leave our focus. It needs to be figured out. You know, what's our plan B to make sure that this project goes forward regardless of the outcome of the grant? I would like to see the map really quick. If you could go back to that. So the other concern that I have is this project basically connects all the gaps except for a huge gap on Oak Tree to get to the crossing. And so I'm wondering why that is not, I mean, it's probably, I can't tell in terms of scale, but it looks like a fairly large gap. And what is, oh, I guess they would go through the other way. Students could walk through the other way. That's a long bypass though. Okay.
Well, Commissioner Smith, if I understand you correctly, the blue lines represent existing sidewalk, and on Oak Tree Terrace, right, on either side of the sidewalk from really Holcomb Boulevard to the corner, there is no sidewalks there. That's a county jurisdictional road. I'm not even recalling whether that's we've done a jurisdictional transfer on that, but you're right. Basically, in order for a pedestrian to get to the sidewalks that were built by the development that's down in the canyon, it requires, you know, it would be additional sidewalk in that area as well. The other piece that I'm not sure that you're referring to is, you know, why isn't there a proposed line on the, I guess it would be the bottom side of Holcomb or in the corner there where there's a blue line there where Dana's pointing at to Oak Tree Terrace, and that is that.
I know that'd be very difficult.
Yeah. So, you know, these projects, I mean, this is a small piece of it. Some of it, we pursued a grant for this project, I want to say 5 years ago, and we're unsuccessful then. It has been on our radar. Some of the new sidewalk that's shown is fronting some undeveloped property. Our hope was that we would see some improvements be accomplished with that development, but that just hasn't come to be. So, but you know, the other challenge with Holcomb Boulevard is there's a lot of open ditches along there. So, you know, this project is expensive because we got to fix the stormwater system as well. So there, I mean, you know, there's a lot of demands around a lot of parts of the city. Holcomb Boulevard has been one of those areas where Lisa's right. We haven't put a lot of money into since that project that was done that included the street lighting and included most of the improvements that got folks from kind of the lower end of Holcomb up to the grade school. But that's been about all that's been accomplished.
Commissioner Smith.
Oh, well, I think that's it. I guess, I'm still concerned about that gap on Oak Tree, but, you know, you're going to have, that crossing really is encouraging students then to walk on a street with no sidewalks to get to the crossing, rather than going to the long way around. The street isn't labeled, but if you go to the left on the sidewalks on Oak Tree towards where it connects to Holcomb, down, left, that street there. So then there's a pathway that connects to Holcomb there.
That's
My
correct.
assumption is that's too close to the corner for a crossing there, right?
Yeah, I think we've heard from the neighborhood, and we agree that, you know, just the traffic, especially the downhill traffic that's coming down the hill, you know, unlikely that, you know, that would be a safe crosswalk location without, you know, some complex notification signage that really kind of went all the way back up towards Oak Tree Terrace on Holcomb.
I'd have to drive out there to look, because I'm not that familiar with Oak Tree Terrace in terms of what it's, so that gap where the sidewalk is to Holcomb, is that like an area that's fairly easy for people to walk on the street, or is it not?
It's so wide, it's got curb and, my recollection is it's got curb and gutter on both sides. It's, it has steep slopes on the back sides of those curbs, both up on the uphill side and on the downhill side. So in order to build those sidewalks, if we were going to build them on the, you know, using the existing curb alignment, would be another expensive project in some areas. You know, it's wide though, in the sense that it's a 2-lane road with capacity for parking, from what I recall. But yeah, it means people walk on the asphalt instead of on a sidewalk.
Well, could we take parking away on one side of Oak Tree and you know, do some kind of a barrier so that the kids could walk there?
We could. I mean, kids walk there today. I would say it's a lightly traveled street, although it serves the homes that are down in the canyon. I think, you know, there's no cut through there, for instance. So there's no users other than the home, the folks who live in the home, and the folks who service the home, and the folks who visit the home. So I don't get a lot of complaints from the neighborhood about you know, pedestrian or child safety until they get to Holcomb. And then that's the concern area right there, is how do they cross? I believe the school district drops the students off on their side of the street. Yeah. Dana, do you know anything about drop off and pick up for the school children along that?
I don't recall the exact locations, but we did get all of the bus stop locations from the school district, so that we had that as we looked at, you know, how do these students currently ride the bus? How could they walk and utilize these crossings? So we have it. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Well, it seems to me that would be a fairly cheap solution, is just take parking away from one side of Oak Tree, from that corner up to Holcomb Boulevard. And, you know, again, it's pretty much a neighborhood street. So I think probably just marking it as a, you know, bike path / pedestrian path would resolve that issue. Commissioner O'Donnell?
For Ms. Webb, when is the award date for this?
So we would know by the end of this, end of December, timing, and then we could pretty quickly get the documentation signed with the state for the grant and move forward into, you know, more detailed design work, the permitting that's required for the natural resource overlay, and then some likely right-of-way acquisition. And so all of that could happen in early 2021, and depending on how the land use component goes and the right-of-way acquisition, we could be under construction as early as 2023.
So here's my concern, and it mirrors Ms. Lisa Novak's concern. We're placing our bet on getting this. It's 6 months away from even being awarded, much less work starting under it. Could we potentially reassess current projects in the queue and financing thereof to see if there's anything we can do in the interim? Because if we go after this and it fails, we're back to zero. We're back to square one 6 months from now. So, I mean, I think the Parklets request is a fair one. And I don't want to just take a flyer at it like we did last time. Could we potentially go back and re-examine our capital projects and say, could we move some things around to at least make some progress? My other concern is apparently we go for multiple grants. There was one before this, and is there another after this? Is there a third grant that you're going to talk about tonight?
No.
No.
Okay, well, regardless, as we pursue multiple grants, should we not prioritize? Do we have the city staff manpower to support these grants? Can you support both of these grants without diluting the effort that makes it ineffective?
We could deliver both of these grants if we were.
Yeah, you can support it with the existing city manpower.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
One other thing.
Plan B?
I didn't hear that.
What is Plan B?
What is Plan B? What happens if you don't get the grant?
That was my question.
Yeah, so we, as I opened with on this one, is our intent is to come to you on August 5th with a full kind of summary of our transportation capital plan, which would include both the SDC capital and the gas tax capital projects, and go through those with you, because I think, there is the potential. The commission always has the authority to move things around and reprioritize. We obviously have some things that are in the queue that we can't necessarily change, but there's definitely projects on the horizon that we've heard interest on from the commission in the past, and so we need to talk about those and make sure that we are understanding of the implications of changing things. The other thing that we heard about this particular Safe Routes to School grant is that we can move forward with things like the pedestrian crossing design work. It may be a little more costly to break that out and do it separately, but we could move forward with that outside of the grant and still get either use that as a match or get some credit for that. So, our intent, based on what we heard, was to try to find a way to move forward with those four crosswalks. Since that commission meeting where we got direction, I've had some discussion with some of you about how to do that appropriately, and, making sure we're making those decisions informed, because they'll have impacts on other projects. But we want to do what the commission is interested in seeing us doing here. And, so that's why we're bringing that to you on the 5th.
Okay, but you still haven't answered my question. What happens if you don't get the grant?
Well, if we don't get the grant, then the answer would be the crosswalks seem to be the priority, the rapid flashing beacon crosswalks. I think that was what the neighborhood considers as their top priority. So we'll have to find a way to fund that. And yeah, because there's a chance that we won't get the grant. It's a competitive grant process, and there's more ask. We think there's more ask for this grant, for the Safe Routes to School grant, than there is money to cover that. So we've got to prioritize. If the commission wants to make that a top priority, then we will find a way to fund it. Something else may fall off the plate in the process.
Well, that's the intent of the August 5th work session, right, is to walk through what the cost implications are and the prioritization of projects. And if we're going to fund certain projects that are not in the queue right now or anticipated to be funded, then the ones that are, we're going to have to drop some potentially to fund other projects. So that's the intent of the work session on the 5th, is to answer that question, Mayor.
Commissioner McGriff, you have anything?
I just wanted to ask whether or not, as part of this request, could we also take a very hard look at trying to get the speed reduced on Holcomb? Because I don't feel that a 40-mile-an-hour zone is compatible or conducive with safe routes to schools. And I would think that it needs to be somewhere between 30 and 35. Matter of fact, 30 would even be better. Is there a way for us to do that or look at that, to get that request in as well? To me, it seems if we're looking at safe routes to school, that doesn't fit into the process.
So we've been working with the neighborhood and with the Transportation Advisory Committee to lower the speed limit. So this gives a little bit of a timeline of that effort. So back in September of 2019, we did a presentation to the Transportation Advisory Committee that included a staff safety analysis of the corridor, results of a community survey about the speed limit. And at that meeting, the Transportation Advisory Committee recommended moving forward with a request to lower the speed limit. In October of 2019, that was submitted to ODOT for review. ODOT estimated 6 to 9 months to complete that review. In March of 2020, ODOT stopped all speed studies due to the pandemic. In May, they adopted a new speed zone manual, which allows them to set speed limits based on a different standard, which addresses some of the urban context of cities versus rural areas. So that new speed zone manual will benefit Oregon City in our request. In June, I authorized ODOT to complete the field spot speed collection even during the pandemic so that we could continue to move this effort forward. And as of July, our request is still in the queue at ODOT. So we have been working with the neighborhood and ODOT to lower the speed limit.
So my second part of the question is, so how did the city of Portland get to reduce their residential streets from 25 to 20? I mean, it seemed like it happened overnight. Now, I know in reality that didn't, but, you know, are they as special as we think they are?
Actually, all cities have the ability to lower the speed limit from 25 to 20 in a residential zone when it meets certain criteria.
Okay.
So this corridor does not meet that criteria, but we did use that criteria to lower the speed limit in the Kenema neighborhood.
Right.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner O'Donnell, you had your hand raised?
Is he muted?
He's frozen.
He's frozen?
We lost.
We lost him, but Mayor, in the meantime, I do have a citizen comment that was submitted. It's Bob LaSalle for this agenda item.
Is he calling in?
No, he's physically present in the room.
Mr. LaSalle.
Do we want to take 5 minutes to get Frank back on?
Yeah, do we want to wait and, do you want to take a 5-minute break?
See if we can get Mr. O'Donnell back.
Let's just wait a minute and see if he doesn't get back.
He might have his phone, you might text him and say,
Are we, please hold for 1 sec.
we lost him.
Frank just texted me. He's trying to reconnect, so let's give him a minute.
There we go.
All right, let's take 5. Well, let's call it 8. We'll come back at 8:30.
Okay.
My name is Bob LaSalle, and I live in the Park Place Neighborhood Association. In fact, I live there on Oak Tree Terrace, where some of this conversation has gone to. I hadn't intended to speak this evening, but considering this subject, I think I might like to make some things clear. No one seems to acknowledge the fact that at least 10 years ago, the citizens in Park Place went door to door and got permission for the homeowners on Holcomb Boulevard to grant their property to have sidewalks put on that north side of Holcomb Boulevard between Winston Drive and School Drive. Now, there's also been the subject of the topography is somewhat difficult. Topography is difficult no matter where you go, for crying out loud. And so to use that as an excuse is pretty weak. This is just trying to remember the stuff I thought about. Oh, we've had no one suggest maybe having some special meetings to discuss exactly where the proposed crosswalks should be. The one at Oak Tree Terrace is the first one that comes to mind, is obviously in a bad location because of sight distances and so on. So where else on Holcomb would we put that fourth crosswalk? Would it be cheaper in a different location? Also, we've not seen any exact figures, which indicates a lack of research on how much it would cost for each location, even not exactly, but some preliminary figures. They've gone anywhere from $35,000 to $100,000 per crosswalk. Quite a price difference there. And we keep hearing, we've heard for years and years and years about safe routes to schools. They're wonderful, they're great, hooray, we get free money. But we've heard about other grants that we didn't get throughout the city, not just Parklets, but throughout the city. So you apply for grants, you don't get them, you make contingency efforts, and we've asked for further research on this, and it keeps getting delayed and delayed, and the Park Place neighbors are really, really frustrated. We appreciated the city commission gave what we thought were marching orders to proceed with these crosswalks. Nobody's even considered, well, let's negotiate with the Park Place Neighborhood Association. Instead of 4 crosswalks, how about 2 crosswalks in the most logical, practical locations? We haven't heard anything like that. All we keep hearing about is safe routes to schools, or we don't have enough money, or it's on down the road. And people are getting sick and tired of listening to this stuff going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. So, further discussion?
Nope.
So is there a motion?
If there was, sorry, Mayor, this is Tony. If there is no further discussion on this topic, would we like to move to the next two agendas, which are discussions about the support or not support of the grant applications for the two separate grants?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I think that we've kind of discussed this, and I don't know if my fellow commissioners are ready, but I think we should go ahead and move forward with the, either supporting the resolution 2017 and 2023, and kind of help get this moving forward.
Mr. Conkle, do you have some more presentation on this?
No.
No, we do not. I believe
We can introduce the item, and then just ask if you want to support it or not by way of a motion.
I think we do have citizen comment requested for 7C and 7D.
So both were Lisa Novak. Lisa, are you on the phone? I'm going to unmute you for a second. Did what you have to say under the first agenda item, does that just apply to the next agenda items, or did you actually have a comment on each specific agenda item?
No, just for all of the agenda items.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
So we can move.
So let's take the first one first, whichever it is, Tony.
I'd like to move resolution number 20-17, authorizing the nomination of the Park Place Urbanization Study for 2020 Transportation and Growth Management Grant Program.
Rocky's off.
Second?
Rocky's off.
All right, I said second, I was on mute.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday?
Aye. What's the next one?
I'd like to move resolution number 2023, authorizing the nomination of the Park Place Holcomb Boulevard Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Project for 2020 Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant Program.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. I just have one comment, and that is I was pretty sure at the last time we talked about this that we had told city staff they needed to move forward with, putting these crosswalks in, no matter how it happened. And now we're moving this ball 2 years down the field. And while I understand, getting quote free money is a good thing, I think we owe it to the Park Place neighborhood to get something going. So I would say I'm going to support the motion, but if we don't get the grant, then staff needs to have a plan ready to go to get this thing moving way before 2023.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I agree with you completely, and I say let's start moving forward in some way, shape, or form. As Mr. Lewis said, he can start his planning function at least. Don't wait till December to a decision on a grant award. Let's get moving on something. Now, I will say I had a conversation with a member of Park Place, and I asked about 2 crosswalks instead of 4, and that person responded to me that they needed all 4. So I want Mr. LaSalle to hear that from me. So let's move forward again. Let's approve this, but let's prioritize. Let's do something in the meantime, not putting all our eggs in one basket.
Okay.
Mayor Holliday. Mayor Holliday?
Further discussion?
Yes, just one more thing.
McGriff.
Yes, sir. We will have the opportunity to further solidify that conversation, as was stated by City Manager Conkle, on August the 5th.
Yes.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday?
Aye. Motion passes. What's next?
Second reading.
The next item is a second reading of ordinance 20-1008. It's amending chapter 2.30 of the Oregon City Municipal Code, and that is the Citizen Involvement Committee amendment.
Move to approve.
Second.
Further discussion? Call roll.
Wait,
Just to read it.
Carrie Richter's gonna read that for you.
I'm gonna read
Sorry,
it.
Ms. Ricker.
Ordinance number 20-1008, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending chapter 20.30 of the Oregon City Municipal Code Citizen Involvement Committee.
I think it's chapter 2. You said chapter 20.
So, sorry, amending chapter
roll.
2. Sorry.
Yeah, amending chapter 2.3.
2.30.
Okay, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye.
The next agenda item is the public improvement contract with Paul Brothers Incorporated for the construction of the DC LaTourette Park. And I believe
Who's got this?
Don Robertson is on the line.
That is correct.
Mr.
Good
Robertson,
evening.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. It's with great pleasure and an honor to be able to present this for you this evening. The construction of DC LaTourette Park, or the reconstruction of DC LaTourette Park, has been a long-term project. It's been on the books for many years, from what I understand. This is truly a grassroots effort that took place a number of years ago with a young Girl Scout troop that kind of took this on to make improvements to that facility when they were in grade school. Those same young girls are now young ladies in high school and starting to look forward to moving on to college. So this project has been around for quite a while. The bids came in last week on the 7th, totaling $595,390,000. That incorporates both the alternatives of $21,000 for the staircase in the southeast corner and for additional plantings for $9,800, bringing the total bid cost to $595,390. Not only will this be a terrific project, wonderful amenity for the community, replacing what is an old park that replaced an old swimming pool, but it also is an item that has shown up on our deferred projects list. Notice I said projects, not maintenance list. This project, when incorporated with all the overhead, showed a total of $963,000, so nearly $1 million will come off of our deferred projects list with the completion of this project. It is, again, my great honor to be able to present this to you. You have the opportunity to move this forward, and that's what staff recommendation is. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the commission?
No, sir.
Just one, sir.
Commissioner Smith.
I'm curious about the mural that is in the park. What is the plan with that? Is that going to be maintained and kept up, or is it staying in with the project? How does it fit in with the design of the park?
I believe the mural that's like on the old swimming wall on the southern side, I think that'll be maintained, but I'm not, I'll have to get back to you 100% on that one.
Okay.
But I believe was the intention of it.
Mr. Mayor?
Commissioner McGriff, do you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to say that, yes, that was the intent of the plan, that the mural there on the side of the old pool be maintained. And I would like to ask my fellow commissioners if I could have the honor of making the motion to approve this. I've been a representative to this from the Neighborhood Association, and then as a city commissioner, bird dogging this project since it started with as Don describes them, as young ladies who were in elementary school who are about ready to go to college.
Your honor, young lady, go ahead.
I would like to move that we approve the public improvement contract with Paul Brothers for the construction of the David Charles LaTourette Park.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner McGriff, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Call a roll, please.
I think it was Commissioner O'Donnell.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye, with pleasure.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor, could I have 2 minutes?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Conkle.
I would just like to personally thank Mr. Robertson. He stepped in as the interim Parks and Recreation Director for the city. He has done above and beyond what I think he expected and I expected, stepping in to help guide the Parks and Recreation Department, but also the city as a whole. He brought incredible patience, incredible knowledge, tremendous leadership, and I'm sure neither of us expected when he agreed to take this on that we would go through multiple new parks breaking ground, contracts being put in place, staying on top of park maintenance, and dealing with a pandemic. So I really do want to thank Don for all the efforts that he put in. He was wonderful to work with, and really worked well with staff. And I'm going to miss working with them, and I just want to say thank you very much.
Let's not forget Mrs. Robertson.
Mr. Conkle,
Yes, sir.
could you put a letter together to that effect for the commission to sign?
Yes,
So
sir.
that we can give him something permanent?
Yes, with pleasure.
Mayor Holliday, thank you. That's a great idea. Thank you for suggesting that. I also wanted to thank Don and his wife as well, because she had a lot to do with this.
She's listening right now, so be careful.
Okay, so let's move on.
So the next agenda
Thank you very
item.
much.
Yep. The next agenda item is 7G. That's the real estate contract for the sale of the Oregon City Police Department property located at 320 Warner Milne Road to F&F Structures. And we have Chief Band on the line here.
Chief Band.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and get started here. So the City Commission directed staff to prepare a real estate contract for the purchase of 320 Warner Milne to F&F Structures. The revised contract has incorporated a seller's right to accept other purchase officers, often referred to as a bump clause, that will allow the city to continue to market the sale of the property to other potential buyers and allow F&F to match any offer made to the city for the purchase of the property within 1 business day. The buyer will provide $15,000 earnest money that would be applicable to the $2.8 million purchase price. The buyer's due diligence period will expire on October 18th, 2020, and the sale will close on October 30th, 2020. And discussions with the potential buyer who is here tonight as well to provide any testimony or answer any questions. One of the concerns brought up was related to what triggers the bump clause. In the contract, the way it's written is that it would be upon the submittal of a letter of intent from another buyer that would trigger the requirement to move within 24 hours on the closure of the sale. The concern is that a letter of intent is non-binding. So that's true on both sides of this deal in terms of someone could submit a letter of intent. Typically, I would bring the letter of intent to the City Commission in executive session to review and discuss. If the City Commission were to move forward with that letter of intent, that would trigger the requirement to make a decision on whether to move with the contract by F&F. So what that does is two things. On the plus side, it gives us that flexibility in terms of continuing to market the property. A letter of intent is non-binding. It is not an agreement. It is not a sale. So potentially, if F&F does not move, their contract would expire, and we would have a letter of intent to which we would still need to move through potentially due diligence and any other issues with a potential buyer to get to a point of entering into a real estate contract. From the F&F buyer side, because it's non-binding, how serious is the offer that would force them to move? So, just presenting both sides of the argument, our concern would be from the seller side, if we were to raise the standard to implement the bump clause, so you could imagine we'd have to be into some type of a real estate contract, the other buyer would essentially be expending funds for due diligence, any necessary studies, knowing that at any point when their offer comes in, F&F could essentially buy them out at that price. So, in most scenarios, there's money at risk on both sides. And from the city's standpoint, our risk is with the bump clause, with the letter of intent, is that you potentially lose a contract that you have to a letter of intent, which may never become a real estate contract. If we raised that standard, the downside is that you may not ever get another interested party because they're not willing to risk the funds to do the work to get to a real estate contract, knowing that at any point their ability to close is preempted. So Carrie's here to help explain that a little bit better if I did not. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have concerning that component. The way the contract's written now is that it's dependent upon a letter of intent being submitted. The other request is an exclusion of both F&F, but then also to their assign as part of the contract. So they could assign the contract to another entity. Currently, the contract is not set that way. That was a request that we received as well.
Chief Band, do you have anything for us before I talk to Ms. Richter?
No, I think it might be better if there's some implications, I guess, that if you not want to do this, I think there's at least some things to throw in there before you guys make a final decision, just in terms of we have talked to the broker, and if you guys approve this, I think we move forward, but it might be better for you guys to maybe talk about it a little bit, and then I can weigh in on that afterwards if we're not going to do this, just so everything has been considered for you if you decide not to do it.
So does anybody want to hear from Ms. Richter?
I don't need to. I understand the bump clause.
Okay, so who's got questions?
I do.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, Mr. Conkle, is it appropriate for me to address the question to you, or should I address it to the persons that are in attendance?
Depends what your question is.
It's a question for them.
If it's
well, let's bring up whoever is here from F&F.
So they're both pointing at each other. And then I do have a question for you.
Sure.
So before we get to Commissioner McGriff's question, I want to give them a chance to say whatever they want to say.
That's fine. My first question is actually for Mr. Conkle, and my second question is for F&F.
So if you'd state your name and city of residence for the record, please.
John Miller, Wilsonville, Oregon.
I guess, was there anything you wanted to add, or?
Well, maybe just a comment.
Sure.
On what you had said. Our concern with the non-binding offer requiring a potential bump is that anybody could make any offer that is unsubstantiated. Possibly they could be unqualified. You haven't done any due diligence. They haven't done any due diligence, and we could be 70 days into this, expended our earnest money, and as you know, I think we're doing an appraisal, seismic analysis, and a level 1 with kind of our partner buyer. And to be that far in and to get really an offer that's not bona fide makes things pretty difficult. There is no expenditure for a buyer to make an offer. using a real estate contract. There is no due diligence period that starts before a real estate contract. So our expectation is before we get bumped, that someone give you a binding offer and you guys have the intent to sign it. And then if that happens, then we can have that moment where we decide to move forward, not some non-binding arbitrary offer that is meaningless, that there's no commitment.
Okay, thanks, sir. Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, my question for Ms. Richter and Mr. Conkle are along those same lines. I'm uncomfortable with the uncertainty of a letter of intent because of the very reason that was specified. I don't see how that is real, and if we don't put in a provision and that they have to put some money on the table, my opinion, they need to have some skin in the game because I don't like the odds that we have in this. We could end up with nothing. I understand what a bump clause does, but I don't know if a letter of intent really gets to what we really want. So that's my question and concern all at the same time.
So a letter of intent is a manifestation of intent to purchase. And so it isn't verified in any way. As I understand, the issue is that a potential third-party buyer isn't going to put the work in if they're not going to really get anything. A broker's not going to try to market a property that is already subject to an existing contract. And then, on top of that, not only does the third party have to have filed the letter of intent, but then they have to prove up something or they have to go through the contract drafting process. So that's another expense that they may not want to pursue, knowing that there's already another firm deal on the table. The concern that I have raised with Tony about the concerns that F and F have about the letter of intent not being verifiable is that the term bona fide offer is not defined either. Mm-hmm. So, and as I understand commercial real estate parlance, bona fide offer doesn't have a real legal meaning. It's not really very customary. Mm-hmm. A commercial transaction happens with the letter of intent and then a negotiated contract. There's not a lot in between. And so although you can say it has to be bona fide, who's going to validate it? Who's going to know whether it's legitimate? Who's going to, we're going to be trusting parties in any circumstance, it seems to me.
I don't know if that's what Commissioner O'Donnell had intended, so that's my concern.
Commissioner McGriff, do you have another question?
Yes, my second question is involving the, hang on here. So I guess my first question is a two-part question. It's about due diligence. So what due diligence have you completed to date? And I'm really curious about why you need 75 more days.
Yeah, so there's been quite a process. We started in December under contract. We had a plan for the site that included one person buying the existing police building, and then we had plans to develop the undeveloped parcels. There's two parcels, but kind of the undeveloped portions of the property. That plan, which I think we shared with you, utilized an access between the Danielson Mall that in the process
of I remember all that.
Had been blocked. So we went through that planning process. After that happened, we got a 60-day extension to explore with Danielson to see if we could get the access restored. That process was completely frustrated. He was not willing to.
Okay, so the question is, what due diligence have you done to date?
So we did all of the plans, generated the plans. That is the due diligence. We came up with the utilization. We had a buyer for the building in tow. We had a tenant in tow potentially for one of the buildings, and that evaporated. So all of that work to get those people in place was the due diligence, and it was extensive. You don't draw plans without doing the due diligence. We had budgets, contracts, agreements drafted. And so subsequently, we now have the original person along with us that was going to buy the building. It looks as though now they are going to buy the entire site along with us. And they needed some additional time because they want to do their own seismic analysis of the building. They want their own appraisal. They're actually mandated to do that and do a level 1 as well. So they wanted their own reports by their people before they move forward with us. So that's
this is in parallel to what you're already doing?
Yes.
It's
in addition to what we've done.
A lot of extra work.
Yes.
So the other question was the part of the due diligence you're saying here about a survey. So a survey hasn't been done?
No, not a survey, a level 1 environmental analysis and a seismic analysis.
Okay, there was something in here about a survey.
It's called level 1 survey.
Okay, well, I've heard it called an EA, so a level 1. That's, to me, a survey is a meets and bounds thing? Yeah. Okay, all right, you clarified that.
Can I say one other thing? I know bona fide is a confusing word legally. I'm not an attorney, but there's a big difference between a non-binding letter of intent and a binding letter of intent, which would be much more acceptable. Binding letter of intent would at least require of the two parties a real intent and good faith to enter into agreement under the terms of a letter of intent. And so maybe a middle ground, instead of saying a word like bona fide, we could maybe agree to a binding letter of intent or a binding deal point outline where we know that the city really intends to sign this agreement, and the buyer really intends to buy under some reasonable conditions. We don't even want to assess the conditions. I mean, just a binding letter of intent would probably be.
So my last question, Mr. Holliday, I have one last question for Mr. Miller.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Miller, now you won't know this, but your colleague, Mr. Fowler, will maybe remember this. So at one time, a former community development director by the name of John Block had drawn up a plan for that property. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have a real concern and a desire to make sure that the wetland that's in the back part of the property is preserved and may be made part of the development. And John had drawn up a really amazing plan that showed how that was going to be utilized as part of a redevelopment. His idea was that we were going to build City Hall there and the library, and I think Mr. Fowler maybe remembers that. And it was a fabulous plan, and I'm sorry that that has never come to fruition. But he had an extensive plan for the wetland to be utilized as part of storm drainage retention and some storm drainage release, and also some sort of an educational.
Is there a question here?
Yes, the question is that I hope that you will make sure that if you're selling this, that they recognize that. I know the city has requirements, but it's just one of those little extra things that, you know, if you're going to the movies, you can hear all the frogs and the whatever critters are back there chirping and everything, but it's an untapped resource. So I'm hoping that that'll be part of your work and your due diligence, that you talk to the potential buyers. And they're nodding.
Ms. Hurway?
Yes.
So wouldn't that be covered by the NROD and all the other things that we have?
That is correct. This property does have a wetland, which is within our natural resource overlay district, so it is subject to those standards.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I think we need to start listening to ourselves here. I heard Mr. Conkle say, how serious is the offer? And I've heard Commissioner McGriff talk about money on the table. And yet, in the past 24 hours, this commission was made aware that F&F has never, ever put down earnest money of any kind, that they have tied up this property for 10 months and continue to want to tie it up under some aspect of trying due diligence. Now, the way it appears to me, and I'm going to be absolutely blunt about this, we just got done using a word like bona fide, and if you look that up, it talks about the thing being genuine, real, or sincere. And there's a real question about is this a genuine offer, a real offer, or a sincere offer, because it appears that there's a lack of negotiating good faith, because multiple times FNF has been before this commission, has been engaged with this staff, and has had the opportunity to verify that they've even put down earnest money. And having had a real estate license myself, and having taken business law like many of us have, we've got no consideration. All we have is conversation, yet we've tied this property up for 10 months when we could have done something with it. So never paying the earnest money tells me there was never any consideration paid, which is part of a contractual agreement. Now, we also informed FNF that the last offer we gave them was non-negotiable, and yet they come back and talk about other terms they want. And I think we're way past due diligence. The situation we're in now is FNF is trying to just essentially, if you read between the lines, it looks like an attempt to flip this property where they could buy it on Tuesday and sell it on Wednesday. And it's not due diligence, it's trying to line up a buyer and flip the property. So I believe one of the options tonight was we don't have a contract, quite honestly, because we never had consideration for a contract. All we've had is conversation. And I believe one of the options that Mr. Conkle put forward as an option is that we don't have a contract. We don't have a contract. Let's move on with other buyers. And that's my suggestion.
Anybody else?
Yes. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So I feel pretty much the same way. I don't know why Oregon City seems to think we can say this is your last chance 5 times. And I don't know how many instances I've been in on this commission where we've done that. And quite frankly, when we say this is the last time, it should be the last time. And so far, we're now on last time, at least number 2, if we really view it that way. But I know that we've given at least 3 or 4 concessions already on this. And at this point, there's one way to simplify the bump clause issue is to not have one and to just not have a deal, period.
Agreed.
Okay, well, let me see if I offer compromise here. So what I'm hearing from FNF is, they don't want to get bumped out by something that's, basically just a letter written on a piece of paper. I also think that Commissioner Griffith's right, that somebody who's coming with a letter of intent should be coming with some kind of consideration for the city. So what if we said there's a refundable $5,000 deposit and a binding letter of intent, and at the same time, FNF has until Friday to deposit the $15,000?
I'll say no to that. FNF was supposed to put down $125,000 deposited or some form of security and did not, and strung us along for 10 months.
Mr. Miller, it looks like you have something to say.
Wait, I just totally disagree. I think we complied with the contract, 100%. So I'm just confused about your confusion.
Well, you better talk to your title company and clear it with them as to why they've never received any funds of any kind.
There was no funds required under the contract. There was just a promise to pay when the money was due.
Note.
One at a time, please. Mr. Miller.
I think there was a period of time in which we entered into contract, and there was a promissory note for delivery of earnest money, but the earnest money never became due under the contract. Had it become due, we would have made the deposit or not moved forward.
You didn't deposit or honor a promissory note of $125,000, and you didn't honor a secondary note of $15,000.
Right.
Mr. Conkle, can you straighten this out for us, please?
So we had an initial contract that we entered into in December. We entered into amendment number 1, which had the requirement for a $125,000 promissory note with the lender, with the bank. Our understanding initially was that that had been submitted. The loan officer emailed us last week and said that that had not happened. So that's, I think, where this confusion is as to why there's, I guess we can ask Mr. Fowler. I've not had a conversation with Mr. Fowler about this. I'm working off of the emails that I've seen from the loan officer that was sent to our staff.
Do you guys want to switch places so he can, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I might throw in here is, so the confusion is even more so in that there's a string of emails that happened in March about basically our business manager, Kelly Dilbeck, was reaching out to get this promissory note to make sure that that had been put there. Mr. Fowler said as soon as this, I guess it would be that first extension was going to get done, that he would put that in. And then in June, I believe, we had gotten word from the title company, Kelly had, that the promissory note had been secured, which I shared, I know, at least with Commissioner O'Donnell. And then we another email from her stating that she had been incorrect and that had never been. So this has been kind of an ongoing conversation.
Mr. Fowler.
Dan Fowler, business here in Oregon City. I reside in West Lynn. With all due respect to the commissioners, we have followed the agreement. I have an email, and there's two different issues. There's a $125,000 promissory note. Then there was an amendment to the contract that changed that when we came in for time for a 60-day extension and a $15,000 promissory note. So there's two different things. And a promissory note is not cash. It's not something that you run in and pay until it is due. I emailed the $125,000 promissory note to Kelly and to the title company and to my business partner on the same day in the same email. That is done. It's in March. I don't know the exact day. That is done and was done. It never became due and payable because the agreement was amended. We have not tried, you spoke blunt, I'm going to speak blunt. We have not been out of the agreement, nor at any time not paid what was due. That is the truth. When we came in for the second amendment, and the reason we did that is, and I get that, you want things done. So do we. And you just say, well, why, we say these things and people ignore them. We don't like to ignore them, but we're dealing out here in the real world, and sometimes stuff happens. We didn't ask for the issue of the blocked road. We didn't ask for COVID to happen. We didn't ask for a lot of things that happen. Life goes on. Now, on the second note, we got that extension, and there was a $15,000 promissory note to pay. The very next day that we got that, and we communicated this to the city, we got a letter from our user that did the very thing they're doing now, saying, we have to have our own due diligence and all that. And so we knew right then we couldn't comply because of that. And we communicated that. And that's when we came back in and asked for that extension that we're talking about now. It's like we didn't want to risk the $15,000 if it was going to not go through. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a business transaction. We have a buyer where they need the due diligence period. We don't. We don't need it. The buyer needs it. I think the suggestion, and we can get into the non-binding, binding. Look, if we're the ones that have put up time and effort and money, if somebody else comes in the deal and does a letter of intent, they haven't spent one penny to write a letter of intent. If they want to write a purchase and sale agreement that binds them, they can write a purchase and sale agreement. They don't spend one penny. We have to react in one day if you guys take that. They're not going to be out any money. They can write a purchase and sale agreement. You guys look at it and decide it's legitimate and that you're going to take it. And all you have to do is communicate to us, and we have to come up in one day and buy the property. That's the way the deal would work. The only ones that would be out would be us. The new buyer isn't going to be hurt. Now they take the risk that we might come step in and buy it if in fact they put their offer in. Okay. If the city wants this sold, you got to work with us. We're not the enemy. We're out here trying to help you get this sold.
I'll respond to that.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
As of 9 o'clock last night, we received notice from our city manager that no promissory note was ever in the custody of the title company, a title company that you chose. I'm just not prepared to go forward under these terms.
The reason the last promissory note was not put in is because we came in and asked for this extension that we're talking about now. When we came 2 weeks ago, that's when we communicated that.
I'm not talking about the last promissory note of $15,000. I'm talking about
I'll forward you the email that I sent it. That 125.
I don't even see it.
I'll forward it to you.
Chief Ban, hang on. Chief Ban, can you confirm that first $125,000 promissory note got to you at least?
It did not get to me, and Kelly never received it. I would have to go back and look. I have emails from I cannot remember her name, at the title company stating that they had never received it.
Look, just give me a minute. I'm going to show you the email that went to Kelly and to Debbie Chase of the title company. I have it here. Let me just calm down a second and get it, because I do not like being called out. I sent that email. I have proof that it went to them, and I'm not going to move forward on a lie. It's ridiculous. Just hang on. I'm going to look at it.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Pull it up.
Mr. Conkle?
Yes, sir.
So, this thing is wound on, and, I want to be fair to everybody here. And I haven't been privy to these email chains or to know what exactly has or has not happened. Would it kill us to postpone this to the next meeting so that we can see all the documents?
Looking it up right now.
Would it, I know that, well, obviously F&F would like to move forward as quickly as possible with their buyer. But at the end of the day, this is a commission decision as to, do you have enough information to make a decision?
Mr. Mayor?
Chief Ban.
So, just a couple things to think about, and I've never been back in front of you with the same thing so many times, and I completely understand the level and share the level of frustration that we're back here dealing with this again. The one thing to consider is, so I start thinking, okay, if this happens, what do we do? If this happens, what do we do? And so, my sort of, we need the money. And so my concern is, okay, if we don't do this, then what are our next steps going to be? And I think that would be obviously going back to our broker. We've had some communication with the broker since. We've talked to them about these clauses. I don't think they're nuts about the fact of going into a contract with us with other things on the table. We did an RFP. We had somebody submit. That was just one person. So if we do not do this, then we will go with them, or we would do another RFP if we weren't happy with who that person was. What I am thinking about is just down the road what that would mean if we don't do this. You know, I think the dollar number is good, the 2.8 for us, and I guess my main thought is if this does not go through, then what? Then we hire a broker and we're paying 4 to 5% or something like that. You know, I just think that's a consideration of, do you plug your nose and move forward, or is it just been to the point where you've had enough and we move forward not knowing what that means? If it costs us, you know, potentially a couple $100,000, maybe we make more money with somebody else. I just don't know. But I think that is a consideration.
Mr. Parno?
Yes, Mayor Holliday.
So let's assume this deal doesn't go through. What does that mean financially for the police project?
We already had that conversation.
Don't you think these should be the subject of internal conversations rather than general conversations?
I'd like to have an answer to my question.
We've had this discussion, and I don't think you were at the meeting. We've already been through that. We talked about loans from departments to pay for to deal with we talked about all this.
I was at the meeting. I want to hear it again. Mr. Parn.
Mayor Holliday and City Commissioners, I do agree that seems to me that we should be able to do some responsible negotiations and be thoughtful about how we approach it. I appreciate the point that you're trying to make, mayors. We do have the wherewithal to continue with the project and move it forward by using some internal processes of internal fund loans, which are completely legal within state budget laws. So we do have that capacity.
Commissioner Smith?
So my worry here is we are debating this topic where we have two people clearly a no, two people that are clearly a maybe, which does not make a consensus. So no matter what we are doing right now, it's not going to end in a vote. So we're completely just wasting time right now.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, I don't believe that we are wasting time. I initially had some concerns when we started this process, but I do want to say that after discussions with the city manager and Chief Band, I'm comfortable with moving this forward. So that's where I am.
Well, my point is there won't be a vote because there's going to be one making a motion, one making a second, and it's going to be 2-2. So then what?
Which my point is in order to avoid that tie-breaking situation, let's move this off until the first meeting in August. We'll all five be here, and then we can have a majority of the commission make a decision.
Well, you're going to need a majority to do that.
Well, the point is, Commissioner Smith, is that it's going to end up being a 2-2 anyway.
Right. Well, it'll probably be that to move it to the next agenda too.
You know, I tried to, if I may speak, Mayor.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I tried to move this forward last time when I talked about putting in, and then we did put in the bump clause. And we talked about we had enough conversation with F&F that we have been worked and reworked, and that promissory notes never showed up. And that's our most recent current information. And we told them this is going to be our offer. We really don't need a counter offer. We gave an offer, and they've tried to tailor it again to put them into an advantageous position to maybe not put any money down, but be in a position to then flip the property. So there comes a point in my business life where I just move on. And I'm sorry to say I'm at that point. And I tried to save it with the addition of a bump clause.
Thank you, sir. So I'm reading his email from Mr. Fowler, and it says he's going to send it. I don't see any confirmation, at least in this email, in the attachment itself.
Well, there's a difference between going to and have sent.
Well, no, there it is. That's an attachment from the email. It says, signed by Mr. Fowler on December 18th.
mean, whose possession is that? Because their own title company or realtor can't verify that. And our staff, quite honestly, whoever's handling our end, did not do an acceptable job to verify that that was done. So here we are.
There's not a CC on there to any city staff.
Kelly Dillback.
But to reply to Kelly,
It's to Katie Riggs.
No.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I sent these, and I think what Debbie Chase is talking about, because she has this one, is the second promissory note that was amended is what she said she didn't have, not this one.
okay, hang on. Stay seated, Mr. Fowler. So here's my question. If would you be willing to sign this thing tonight as it sits?
No, it's flawed. It's flawed.
Okay, thanks, sir.
There's a part in there that's...
I understand. So who wants to make a motion?
Well, I guess I will.
Has every commissioner read the letter from Mr. Conkle last night?
Yes.
Specifically says that last week the title company informed staff that the $125,000 promissory note had not been provided as outlined in the amendment.
Well, the email kind of contradicts that.
Yes, I read it, but what I just saw on the screen tells me, and in this time of COVID and all the other things, all kinds of things have dropped out. But the point is, it looks to me like at least the first $125,000 promissory note got to somebody. So Commissioner McGriff, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to ask if anybody was willing to go with your first request, which is to put it off until the 5th. Is that our next meeting, Mr. Conkle?
Yes.
It doesn't look like it.
Because, I mean,
and even if we did, what's our status in the meantime? No contract exists? A contract exists? What is it?
There's no contract. There's no contract.
Okay.
There's nothing. Nobody's bound to anything.
But if we signify our intent to move it, that's...
Well, I mean, maybe.
Commissioner McGriff, do you have a motion?
Well, I guess I can make an attempt to, I would like to move that we approve the real estate contract for the sale of the Oregon City Police Department property located at 320 Warner Milne Road to F&F Structures, Inc.
I will second that motion. Further discussion, Commissioner Smith?
You're going to get the outcome I said.
Well, it's a process. We have to do it. So, Commissioner O'Donnell, you have anything further?
I'm surprised that in the meeting we had before your last position before tonight, was it now they have to walk in with their check and put their money down, and now it's a changed position. So I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Mayor Holliday, this is Katie. I just want to mention that we did receive a citizen comment that you all received via email. I want to submit that for the record. That was received by James Nasita, I believe. Is that right? Yeah, and then
everybody's seen it.
Okay, and then I also wanted to mention that there was a few scrivener's errors in the contract that we will be updating those.
Okay, call a roll.
Okay, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
No.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
No.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye, the motion fails. So, where do we go from here, Mr. Conkle?
As it relates to this contract?
Well, there is no contract.
There is no contract.
So
where do we go from here?
The
we go to the consent agenda?
We will, okay, so first off, is there any direction from the commission on this item? Otherwise, we're going to move forward with trying to hire a broker at this point.
I'd like to move this to the 5th.
Well, I agree with you, Commissioner McGriff, but we can't do that either.
What happens?
I can use my authority to put it back on the agenda for the 5th.
I move to table to the 5th?
You can't get the votes to
Oh,
table
okay,
it.
all right.
The city manager could bring it back on the 5th, depending on what kind of developments happen between now and the 5th.
Okay.
I realize, I guess what I'm asking is we have a 2-2 vote for everything right at the moment. At the next meeting, we have potentially the ability to get to a decision. Is the commission comfortable with me bringing this back on the 5th?
Yeah, I am Mayor Holliday, and that's in deference to Chief Band's request, and I would like to move it to the 5th.
And I would also submit that this is an important enough decision, and to be honest, I was kind of bizarre that we're here now, but I believe that Commissioner Lyle Smith should have a chance to weigh in on this.
Will Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith agree to that? To allow Commissioner Lyle Smith to weigh in on it?
No, I voted no in the last 3 decisions on this, so my mind was made up way before.
Your mind was made up as soon as you knew Fowler was the deal.
That's not true.
That's the kind of comment we don't need.
That's totally not true.
So I will not be bringing this back. And I'm not saying this to be argumentative or anything, but potentially if 3 commissioners direct staff to bring this back, we will do that at that time. At this point, Chief Band and I will move forward with trying to hire a broker without other direction from the commission.
Understood. Let's move on.
So we pulled the one item off the consent. I think it was 8A.
Yes.
And Ms. Turway will just give a brief update of the addition to that.
Thank you very much. The item we pulled to add an Appendix A, which is an explanation of the neighborhood association representatives and what their job description is. I was unaware that there was an Exhibit A. My apologies. Now we have it in hand. It is what was approved by the CIC and created by the CIC subcommittee. The chair of the CIC is here and agrees with Appendix A. I have no comments on it. So we recommend approval of the bylaws with the new Appendix A that was emailed to you earlier.
I'd like to so move.
Second.
Moved and second. Further discussion? Call roll.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday?
Aye. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff?
Aye.
Mayor Dan Holliday?
Aye. Mr. Manager, you got anything?
The one update is that I'll be out of the office next week. Ms. Turway will be acting city manager while I'm gone. That's all that I have tonight.
Right, partay.
Congratulations, Ms. Turway.
Thank you.
When's the party?
You know, whenever Tony's out of town, something bad happens.
Oh, come on.
Don't say that. Don't say that. Nothing bad's going to happen.
All right. Commissioners, do you have anything?
I do not.
Not at this time.
I have one thing to bring up.
Go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
So I assume that all of us on the commission read the letter from the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde sent to all the partners and regarding Willamette Falls Trust.
Okay.
My concern about that letter is that we got that letter after we renewed an agreement, which a couple of us were concerned about with the Willamette Falls Trust. And clearly, if this letter would have come before that decision on that agreement, I think the dialogue would have been even more so concerning about moving forward with signing that agreement that had already expired after a year. I'm worried that, we basically the Grand Ronde tribe has asked for several specific things from us. And one of the, well, I guess from the partners in general, but one of the things that they asked was, let's see, where is it? A re-examination of the appropriate roles of the Willamette Falls Trust. And we've already signed an agreement. I think we need to relook at that agreement. I think we need to at least put a hold on it until we can have a discussion with the trust on how they are going to respond to the concerns that the tribes have brought up. Because I think, this is a very delicate project. This is a huge mistake with partners that we really need to be working closely with. And so I fear that this really puts us in jeopardy of moving forward in a good project unless we can get some assurance from the Willamette Falls Trust that they have a plan on how to deal with this.
And they did.
Commissioner Smith, did you see the letter from Brian Moore?
I saw the letter from you. I did not see the letter from Brian.
Could we read? Sorry, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, if it would be a pleasure, the commission, we could read that letter just so everyone's up to date on the latest.
Do we have it?
I would like that.
I mean, I know it came after I was already here.
So we'll have Ms. Turway read the letter.
Okay.
This is from Brian Moore, sent today at 5:15 p.m. Dear Willamette Falls Legacy Project partners, as you may know, the Willamette Falls Trust received a letter of concern from Chairwoman Cheryl Kennedy on behalf of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, CTGR, earlier this week. The Trust, as you may recall from previous discussions, has been working to engage with multiple tribes in the region, including CTGR. There are tribes with varying interests at Willamette Falls, and we have been working to better understand the nuance and complexity of this. This effort is to support further refinements to the design of the Riverwalk, not to replace formal government-to-government consultation. This work, in addition to the Trust's primary responsibility of raising private capital funds to help support the Legacy Project. Tribal inclusion has been and continues to be critical to the successful development and implementation of the Legacy Project. In the early stages of this project, we determined that the Trust's tribal engagement work should move forward with the support of a contractor, Mass Design, so that the tribal voices were not overlooked or left out. Today, we have an opportunity to reflect and learn from the missteps identified by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. Additionally, we can begin crafting meaningful changes to the scope of work for the Trust and Mass going forward in support of the Legacy Project. Prior to receipt of the letter from the Grand Ronde, Metro, the Trust, and Mass had just kicked off a series of discussions to improve in respective work to clarify our respective roles in the project to help us do a better job of engaging the tribes meaningfully. The context and framing of the letter highlights the importance of addressing these issues identified. We continue to work to remedy these concerns. Currently, the Willamette Falls Trust is working on a formal apology and response to CTGR. In advance of the Trust's response, I have had a chance to speak with their staff team, and we all want to acknowledge that the way the presentations were structured and delivered have a lot of room for improvement. So you are aware, at the last board meeting, the Trust discussed and expanded to include representatives from the CTGR Tribal Council, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. CTGR formally asked that the vote on the incoming slate of board members be put on hold. The trust respected this request with a motion to postpone the vote until July 20th. We will provide an update on the results of this meeting if there is a change in status. The Willamette Falls team has also reached out to CTGR staff about the letter and has discussed the situation with them and received input on the matters. To date, we have discussed with CTGR their rights, both as a property owner and as a native sovereign nation, as well as Metro's rights as the easement holder. These discussions have included topics such as interpretive signage, funding, and access. I would like to propose giving a refresher presentation on these topics to the partners group at our next regularly scheduled meeting or sooner if this group requests. Feel free to reach out to me by email or cell phone if you have any additional questions or comments. Sincerely, Brian Moore, Willamette Falls Legacy Project Manager.
Thank you. I assume you all saw my response to Ms. Hernandez's letter. I would suggest that we give the city manager and the attorney some time to, try to determine, what exactly happened. This is not an uncomplicated situation when you start talking about more than one tribe talking about their history. So I think rather than go off, half-cocked here, let's give staff a little time to figure out what happened and how they think we should move forward.
Mayor Holliday, may I add to your comment?
Briefly.
So I want to say that, yes, I read the letter. My understanding is that, and still understanding, is that we have 4 core values. Those core values involve telling the story of all the tribes that used Willamette Falls or had some connection to Willamette Falls. And we have not had an opportunity to do that. Each tribe has a story to tell because there are multiple stories and there's going to be different perspectives. I attended the presentations online that were put on by Mass, and I took them as ideas, not as anything that was cast in stone, but ideas about directions to go in. There were many, many, many ideas that were proposed. Nothing was decided, nothing was firm. So I concur with your comment that we let the city manager and staff look into this and we wait and see what happens with the outcome of their board meeting, because they're the ones that really have to deal with this. There's, as you said, this is complicated. This is not easy, not everybody gets along, but I think our process that we have is aimed to helping everybody try to get along and make sure that everybody is heard. And so we hear this, but there's other things to be heard as well. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate that. Mr. Conkle, I would like to schedule a short executive session at the next meeting for us to be able to discuss the contract that we have between Oregon City and the trust.
Okay, understood. Commissioner O'Donnell has, yep.
Yeah, I got it on the screen. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Short comment. I've had the honor of working with 4 tribes in the Pacific Northwest. I've gotten immersed in their culture more than most. Their history is sacred to them. It's often an oral history. There's no one more qualified to tell it than themselves, nor would you want someone telling your family history other than you. So I think it's just a courtesy. I think it was a huge misstep. I hope it can be repaired. And as we saw when we were at the library meeting, you saw how sacred it was when they were relating their history to us. So let those who own it convey it. So that's all I want to say.
I agree, and I think, part of that letter that I sent back, or that email that I sent back, contributed that. My biggest concern here is that, and I can't confirm this until staff has some conversations, but the biggest concern I had was that the trust said, or that the tribes said that they had reached out and asked for materials and asked for discussions, and they got rebuffed by the trust. And that is a real concern to me.
I'll say this, Mr. Mayor. Your letter was quite good, and my compliments on that. And I think the great fear is this is not a pure commercial venture. This is a cultural venture, and it needs to be represented as such. So congratulations on your letter. I know the letter from Brian Moore is a letter of apology. We need to get more in tune with our partners. So thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Smith?
No.
Commissioner McGriff, did you have any final comments on anything?
No, sir. I'd like to move we adjourn.
Okay, then we're adjourned.
Thank you.